Look, I'm not going to lie to you about how this started. It wasn't noble. It wasn't brave. It was 10,000 silver marks and a dead-end life that needed a miracle or a terrible decision. I chose the terrible decision. The courier who brought the offer had the kind of face that told stories without words. All of them violent, none of them with happy endings. She slid an envelope across the table, and inside was a key that hummed with magic I didn't recognize, and a job description that should have sent me running. Guard a prisoner. Don't speak to her. Don't look into her eyes. Don't ask questions. 10,000 marks for a job that came with more warnings than instructions. I took it anyway. The Thornvale facility was exactly where the map said it would be, which somehow made it worse. Places like this weren't supposed to exist on maps. They were supposed to be rumors, ghost stories mercenaries traded over cheap ale. But there it was, carved into the mountainside like a scar that never healed. The entrance was a mouth of black stone, moss-covered and ancient. No guards, no signs of life. Just a single iron door with a lock that matched the glowing key in my pocket. The silence pressed against my ears, the kind of quiet that meant either nothing lived here or everything that did had learned to be very, very still. I thought about the Herrenfeld job, about the screaming, about how I'd been the only one to walk away, and how that survival had cost me everything that mattered. This felt worse. The key turned with a sound like breaking bone. The door swung open on hinges that hadn't moved in years, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Torches flickered to life as I stepped inside. Magic I didn't understand, probably didn't want to. The air tasted like copper and old secrets. Down. Always down. The stairs seemed to go on forever, each step taking me deeper into the mountain's belly. The walls were smooth, unnatural, carved by something other than human hands. Symbols I didn't recognize pulsed with faint blue light, and I had the distinct impression they were watching me. Finally, the stairs opened into a chamber, and that's when I saw her cage. It dominated the room, a cell of black iron and silver script, surrounded by a circle of stones that hummed with containment magic. Torchlight danced across the bars, casting shadows that seemed to move with purpose. The air around it shimmered, reality bending just slightly at the edges. Inside, in the center of all that power and fear, sat a woman. No, not quite a woman. She had the lean, predatory grace of a snow leopard, spotted fur, white and silver and gray, covering what I could see of her arms and legs. Her face was a haunting blend of human and feline, delicate and dangerous all at once. Ears twitched at my approach. A tail curled around her feet, the tip flicking in what might have been irritation or curiosity. She wore simple clothing, gray and worn, but she wore it like armor. Like even in captivity, she refused to be diminished. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. Even from across the chamber, even with my gaze fixed carefully on the ground, I felt the weight of them. Luminous, ancient, sad in a way that made my chest tight. I forced myself to look at the floor, at the walls, at anything but her. "You're the new guard." Her voice was silk over steel, barely above a whisper, but it filled the chamber like smoke. "Don't speak to her." "I'm here to ensure you don't escape," I said, cursing myself the moment the words left my mouth. 3 rules. I'd already broken one. How dutiful. Something that might have been amusement flickered in her tone. "They usually send men who don't speak at all. You must be special." I moved to the corner of the chamber, where a bedroll and supplies had been left. My post. My prison, really, just one without bars. "I'm not special. I'm just doing a job." "Aren't we all?" Silence settled between us, heavy and strange. I busied myself checking the supplies: dried meat, water, a journal with blank pages, and a warning scrawled on the first page in the courier's handwriting. Do not engage, do not listen, do not look. You are not a person to her. You are a function. Act like it. I felt her watching me. Even with my back turned, I felt the weight of that gaze like a hand on my shoulder. "What's your name?" she asked. "Doesn't matter. Everyone has a name, even guards, even prisoners." I kept my eyes on the journal, on the warning, on anything but the pull to turn around and look at her properly. "I have a job. You have a cage. That's all we need to know about each other." A job. She drew the word out, tasting it. What kind of desperation brings a man to a job like this? The Herrenfeld screams echoed in my memory, the smell of smoke and blood and failure. "The regular kind," I said. A soft sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. "They always send the desperate ones, the broken ones, the men who have nothing left to lose." A pause. "It makes it easier when they disappear." My hand went to my sword hilt. "Is that a threat?" "It's a observation." The rustling of movement, fabric against stone. "I've had 17 guards since they brought me here. You know how many left this mountain alive?" I didn't want to know, didn't want to ask. Did anyway. "How many?" "3." The number hung in the air like a noose. "What happened to the others?" "Some broke the rules, some simply broke." Her voice softened. "Some looked into my eyes and saw things they couldn't unknow. And some," another pause, "some tried to be heroes." I turned slightly, still keeping my gaze fixed on the wall beside her cage, rather than on her directly. Even in my peripheral vision, she was striking, dangerous and beautiful in equal measure. "I'm not a hero," I said. "I'm just a man who needs the money." Good. For the first time, something almost like approval entered her tone. Heroes die faster. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence broken only by the sound of her breathing, the shift of her movements, the occasional whisper that might have been words, or might have been wind through cracks in the stone. I followed the rules, mostly. I didn't look into her eyes, kept my gaze fixed on walls, on the journal I was supposed to keep, on the food I delivered through a slot in the bars. I didn't let her speak to me. At least, I didn't answer when she did. But I listened. And with every word she didn't say, every moment of silence that stretched between us, my curiosity grew like a weed through stone. She never begged, never pleaded, never tried to manipulate or seduce or rage against her captivity. She simply existed, patient, watching, waiting for something I couldn't name. On the 4th day, I made my second mistake. I asked her a question. "Why are you here?" The silence that followed was different, heavier, charged with the weight of something breaking, some barrier between guard and prisoner crumbling just slightly. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, dangerous, real. "Because I'm valuable. Because I'm dangerous. Because I'm the answer to questions your employer doesn't want asked." She shifted, and I heard the clink of chains I hadn't noticed before. "But mostly, I'm here because I looked into the wrong person's eyes and showed them a truth they couldn't accept." My hand tightened on the journal. "What truth?" "That cages don't just hold prisoners, guard. They hold secrets. And some secrets are worth more than gold, more than kingdoms." She moved closer to the bars, and I felt her presence like heat. More than 10,000 silver marks. I didn't ask how she knew the price. I didn't need to. I already knew I was in over my head. I stopped sleeping after that conversation, and because I was afraid. though maybe I should have been. No, it was something worse than fear. It was curiosity that gnawed at me like hunger, the kind that turns rational men into fools. Some secrets are worth more than kingdoms. The words circled in my head during my watch, during the long hours when the only sound was her breathing and the occasional drip of water somewhere deep in the mountain's bones. I found myself listening for her movements, cataloging the rhythm of her existence in this cage. On the fifth day, I found the journals. They were hidden behind a loose stone in the wall, wrapped in oiled cloth that had kept them dry despite the dampness that pervaded everything else. 3 leather-bound books, their pages filled with different handwriting. The accounts of previous guards, I realized. The first entry made my blood run cold. Day 1. They say she's a weapon, a monster in beautiful skin. They say her eyes can shatter minds. I'm being paid to ensure she never uses them. Easy money, they said. Day 14. She hasn't spoken in days. Sometimes I wonder if she's even real or just some conjured thing. Day 23. I looked. God help me, I looked into her eyes. I saw. The entry ended there, the pen scratching across the page, as if the writer's hand had been torn away mid-sentence. The rest of that journal was blank. The second journal was more clinical, almost scholarly in its observations. This guard had treated his duty like a scientific study, cataloging everything about Asha, her habits, her movements, the exact timing of when food was delivered. But near the end, the entries became frantic. She is not what they claim. I've been researching the symbols on her cage. They're not just containment, they're suppression. These runes are designed to block something, to prevent her from accessing what? Power? Memory? I need to know more. I found records in the facility archives. She has a name that matters, lineage that matters. They call her the last scion of. The page was torn out, deliberately removed, the ragged edge a testament to someone's desperation to hide the truth. The third journal was the shortest, just a single entry. If you're reading this, you've already broken the first rule. You've already started to see her as more than a prisoner. Turn back now, take your payment and leave. Don't make the mistake I'm about to make. Don't try to be a hero. Her name is Asha Silverclaw, and she is not the monster they claim. I sat there for a long time, the journal heavy in my hands, feeling the weight of those words settle into my bones. You found them? Her voice startled me. I'd grown used to the silence, to the pretense that we existed in separate worlds, despite sharing this chamber. The journals, she continued. Every guard finds them eventually. It's almost tradition at this point. I kept my eyes on the page, on the torn edge where truth had been ripped away. Why didn't they remove them? Because hope is a better prison than iron. I heard her shift, the soft sound of fabric against stone. Let the guards find the journals. Let them ask questions. Let them think they're uncovering some grand conspiracy. Then watch them leave anyway, or disappear, or go mad. It's efficient. You're saying it's all a game. I'm saying that truth without power is just another form of torture. Her voice held an edge I hadn't heard before. Not anger, but something rawer. Resignation. You can know I'm innocent, guard. You can know everything they've done to me. But what will you do with that knowledge? You need the money. You told me so yourself. She was right. God help me, she was right. But I kept reading. The facility had archives, a small room deeper in the mountain, filled with filing cabinets that hadn't been touched in years. I found them during my patrol of the perimeter, when I was supposed to be checking the magical wards for weaknesses. Instead, I looked for weaknesses in the story I'd been told. The files on Asha Silverclaw were extensive. Medical records, containment protocols, incident reports. And buried beneath it all, a single document sealed with 7 different magical signatures, The kind of binding that suggested the contents were either incredibly valuable or incredibly dangerous. Probably both. I broke the seal. I'm not proud of it, but I did it anyway. The document was a genealogical chart, but not like any I'd seen before. Bloodlines traced back centuries, converging on a single family, House Silverclaw, the last ruling dynasty of the northern reaches before the collapse, before the purges, before entire kingdoms were erased from maps and history books. And there, at the bottom of the chart, a single name circled in red ink: Asha Silverclaw, last surviving heir, status, asset, not prisoner, not criminal, asset. I thought of her in that cage, surrounded by suppression runes and iron bars. I thought of the warning about her eyes, about the power they supposedly contained. Mind control, the briefing had said. Manipulation, dangerous and not to be trusted. But there was another entry, this one in a different hand, added as a footnote to the genealogical record. The Silverclaw gift, not domination but revelation. Those who meet the gaze of a Silverclaw heir see truth, their own truth, unfiltered and absolute. Most minds cannot bear it. The gift was the foundation of their rule. Their people saw their own worth reflected in their monarch's eyes and chose to follow. Their enemies saw their own corruption and either repented or destroyed themselves. Note: this makes them extraordinarily valuable for interrogation and negotiation. Also makes them extraordinarily dangerous to those who rule through deception. I read the passage 3 times, my hands shaking slightly. They weren't keeping her because she was dangerous. They were keeping her because she was a threat to their lies. You've been gone a long time. Asha's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I'd been standing at the entrance to the chamber for several minutes, the weight of what I'd learned making my feet heavy. I was checking the wards, I lied. You were reading. She tilted her head, and even without looking at her directly, I could feel the intensity of her focus. Did you find what you were looking for? I found questions, I said, not answers. Questions are more dangerous than answers. Questions make you think, make you doubt, make me what? Care. The word hung in the air between us like a confession. I moved to my usual post, settling onto the bedroll, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd read. Couldn't stop wondering what truth my own eyes would show me if I looked into hers. Tell me about your eyes, I said quietly. The real story, not what they claim. Silence stretched. Then, softly, why do you want to know? Because I'm tired of being lied to. Even if the truth is worse than the lie? Even then. She sighed, a sound like wind through winter branches. My family ruled for 300 years. We didn't rule through fear or force. We ruled through clarity. When we looked at someone, they saw themselves truly, not who they pretended to be, not who they feared they were, just truth. And that's a threat? To those who build empires on false promises? To those who tell people they're free while binding them in invisible chains? A pause. Yes, guard. Truth is the most dangerous weapon of all. I thought of Herrenfeld, of the orders I'd followed without question, of the screaming I'd ignored because duty demanded it. What happened to your family? I asked. They were erased, systematically. My parents, my siblings, everyone who carried the bloodline hunted down and executed. I survived because, her voice caught, because I was young enough to hide, small enough to run, lucky enough to be underestimated. Until you weren't. Until I wasn't. Days blurred together. I stopped counting them. Instead, I counted revelations. The way she never asked for freedom, only acknowledgement. The way her tail curled when she was thinking, the tip twitching like a metronome, keeping time with thoughts I couldn't hear. The way she hummed sometimes, old songs in languages I didn't recognize, melodies that made the suppression runes flicker and dim. The way I found myself talking to her despite the rules. About nothing important at first. The weather and the world above. The taste of fruit I'd had once in a southern market. Stupid things. Human things. And the way she listened like every word mattered. On the 14th day, or maybe the 15th, time had lost meaning. I made my third mistake. The biggest one. I looked into her eyes. It wasn't planned. She'd asked me something about my past, about Herrenfeld, and I'd turned to tell her it was none of her business. Our gazes met, and the world shifted. Her eyes were amber and silver, flecked with gold that seemed to move like living light. But it wasn't manipulation I felt. It wasn't control or domination or any of the terrible things I'd been warned about. It was recognition. I saw myself reflected there, not my face but my truth. The man I'd been before Herrenfeld, the soldier who'd believed in honor and duty, the person I'd killed when I'd followed orders that turned my stomach, the guilt I carried like a second skin, all of it laid bare in her gaze. And beneath it, something else. Her truth, offered freely. Pain and loneliness, and a desperate, aching hope that someone, someday, would see her as more than an asset or a threat. Just Asha. "I'm sorry," I whispered, and I meant it for everything. For Herrenfeld, for the cage, for the 14 days I'd spent pretending she wasn't a person. She didn't speak, didn't need to. Her eyes said everything, and in that moment, I knew I'd already chosen my side. I just hadn't admitted it yet. The decision came quietly, without fanfare or dramatic revelation. Just a simple truth settling into my bones like frost. I couldn't leave her here. I'd spent the night after our gaze met staring at the suppression runes, studying their patterns, remembering everything I'd learned about magical containment during my years as a soldier. The wards were strong, yes, but they were old, and old magic, no matter how powerful, always had weaknesses. Time, wear, complacency. The guards who'd built this place had assumed their prisoner would never have an ally. They'd planned for escape attempts from the inside, not betrayal from the outside. They hadn't planned for me. "You're thinking too loudly," Asha's voice cut through the darkness. I'd thought she was sleeping, curled in the corner of her cage like she always did, her tail wrapped around herself for warmth. "Can't sleep," I said. "Liar, you're planning something." A pause. "Something stupid." I turned to look at her, really look at her, rules be damned. Her eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, amber light that shouldn't have been comforting but was. "How do you know?" "Because you have the same expression the last guard had, the one who wrote that final journal." She shifted, sitting up. "The one who tried to save me." "What happened to him?" "He died 3 steps outside this room. There are defensive wards everywhere, guard. They're designed to kill anyone attempting unauthorized exit. Even you." "Kale," I said. "My name is Kale." She tilted her head. "Kale. A good name for a fool." "Probably." I stood, moving closer to her cage, close enough to see the hope she was trying to hide behind resignation. "But I've been a fool for worse reasons." "This is madness. You'll die." "Maybe." I pulled out the papers I'd stolen from the archives, ward patterns, shift rotations for the patrols. I'd only recently realized existed in the levels above us, supply delivery schedules. Or maybe I've spent 2 weeks studying every inch of this prison, and I know something they don't. Which is that they're arrogant. They think suppression runes and iron bars are enough. They haven't updated their security protocols in decades because nothing has ever challenged them. I met her gaze. They didn't plan for someone on the inside who gives a damn. For a long moment she just stared at me. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. "Why?" "Because you were right. Cages don't just hold prisoners. They hold secrets. I pressed my hand against the cold iron of her cell. And some secrets deserve to be free. The suppression runes were anchored to 7 keystones positioned around the chamber. Break 4, and the entire network would collapse. I'd spent 3 days subtly loosening the mortar around them during my patrols, making it look like natural deterioration. Tonight, I finished the job. The first stone came free with a grinding sound that made us both freeze, listening for alarms. None came. The facility was too confident in its own invulnerability. The second stone. The third. Each removal made the air shimmer, reality bending as the magical prison weakened. The fourth stone cracked as I pried it loose, and the suppression field shattered like glass. Asha gasped, her hands flying to her head. Power flooded back into her, and I could see it, could feel it in the air, a presence that made my skin prickle and my instincts scream danger, even as I kept working. "The lock," I said, pulling out the set of tools I'd fashioned from pieces of my own armor. "I can pick it, but I need time." "We don't have time." Her voice was strained, breathless. "The wards will have registered the break. They'll know." "Then I work faster." The lock was complex, designed to be impossible to open from the inside. But from the outside, with the right tools and enough desperation, it was just another puzzle. My hands shook as I worked, sweat dripping into my eyes. Click, click, click. The lock opened. Asha stumbled out of the cage, and I caught her as her legs gave out. She was lighter than I expected, her frame delicate despite the strength I could feel coiled beneath her skin. "Can you walk?" "I can run if I have to." She straightened, testing her legs. "But Kale, the defensive wards." "I know a way, trust me." Famous last words. The first patrol found us on the 3rd level. 5 men, heavily armed, their eyes cold and professional. I recognized the look. These weren't facility guards. These were specialists. Hunters. "Step away from the asset," the leader said, his hand on his sword. "You've been compromised, mercenary. We're authorized to use lethal force." I pushed Asha behind me. "She's not an asset. She's a person." "Irrelevant. Stand down or we put you down." I drew my sword. "I'd like to see you try." They moved as a unit, trained and coordinated. I managed to parry the first strike, deflect the second, but the third caught me in the ribs, and I felt something crack. Pain exploded through my side. Then Asha stepped forward. "Enough." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, reality itself seeming to bend around the word. The mercenaries froze mid-strike, their eyes going wide as they met her gaze. And I saw it happen, saw the truth of themselves reflected in her eyes, saw them confront every terrible thing they'd done in service of their employers, every innocent they'd hurt, every lie they'd told themselves to justify it. One dropped his weapon and ran, sobbing. Another fell to his knees, hands pressed against his temples as if trying to block out what he was seeing. The leader lasted longest, fighting against the revelation, but even he eventually crumpled, staring at Asha with a mixture of horror and understanding. "I didn't," he whispered. "We didn't know what we were doing." Asha swayed, and I caught her again. Her nose was bleeding, crimson against white fur. The effort of using her power had cost her. "Save your repentance," she said softly. "You knew enough." She released them from her gaze, and they scattered like frightened animals, their formation broken, their certainty shattered. "Move," I said, supporting her weight. "More will come." We fought through 3 more patrols before we reached the surface. Each encounter was the same, Asha using her power to break them, to show them the truth of what they were doing, while I defended her when the revelations weren't enough. By the time we burst through the final door and into the cold mountain night, we were both bleeding, both exhausted, both running on nothing but desperation and stubborn refusal to die in that place. Behind us, alarms finally blared. Ahead, Nothing but darkness and forest and freedom that felt as dangerous as the prison we'd left. "They'll hunt us," Asha said, leaning heavily against me. "They'll never stop." "I know. You've given up everything for this, for me." "I know that too." She looked up at me, amber eyes bright even in the darkness. "Why, Kale? You barely know me. You owe me nothing." I thought about Herrenfeld, about the screaming I'd ignored, about all the times I'd followed orders instead of my conscience, and how it had hollowed me out from the inside. "Because maybe this is how I stop being the person I hate," I said. "Maybe this is how I become someone worth being again." "That's a terrible reason to throw your life away." "Probably." I managed to smile despite the pain in my ribs, despite the certain knowledge that we were being hunted by people with far more resources than we had. "But it's the best one I've got." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we run, together, until we find somewhere safe or die trying." "Together," I agreed. We stumbled into the forest, two fugitives bound by shared defiance and dangerous hope. Behind us, the prison blazed with light as more mercenaries poured out. Ahead, only darkness and uncertainty. But for the first time since Herrenfeld, I was running towards something instead of away from it. And that had to count for something, even if it killed me. We disappeared into the trees, leaving behind everything we'd been: guard and prisoner, mercenary and asset, broken soldier and captive heir. What we'd become in the running, neither of us knew. But we'd find out together. Or not at all. The hunt had begun. And so had our freedom.